Okay, I'll see you.
All right.
Have a good show.
Thank you.
376-715-670-6300.
Ma'am. Sam. I just realized I hadn't called your name the whole time you were here. So I called. Bye.
Bye-bye. 300 East Arkansas. Healthcare is a human right. Call today. Get the help you need. See you Saturday, August 12th, from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. at the Back to School Backpack Giveaway at New Life Christian Fellowship Church, 3 Lake Shore Drive in Little Rock. Assistant students of all ages are giving away a variety of supplies such as notebooks, paper, pencils, pens, crayons, markers, scissors, rulers, glue, folders, and more with each backpack. There's also a community event with food, games, music, and entertainment. That's the backpack giveaway Saturday, August 12th, from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. at the New Life Christian Fellowship Church at 3 Lake Shore Drive at Little Rock. Also, Christopher Bill Smith Simmons Sr.
We are live right here. Let's see. Yes, we are live right here at KABF 88.3 FM, where we are the voice of the people. We are live for Arkansas Talks. Woo-hoo, woo-hoo. Those of you who can see me online, that's my happy dance. Every time I get happy, my body moves, and I bet yours does too. What does your happy dance look like? If you don't have one, get one today, because we need to be able to dance about something in the midst of everything that we face, especially as people of color, Black folks in this world, in this country, in this state. I am Rev Dr. Denise Donnell. I am your host for today, sitting in for Bureau Chief Pat Rogers Ward, who is out taking care of her body, mind, spirit, soul. She's going to be right back next week, ready to continue the conversations that you always have with her. But the phone lines are open with me. The phone lines are open with me at 501-433-0088. 501-433-0088. You can call in at any time and join this conversation through Arkansas Talks. Because we are the voice of the people, and here your voice matters. One of the greetings that I generally use is Sawubona, which means hello, but it also means that you are welcome, you are invited, you are embraced, you are celebrated in this space in the spirit of oneness, that oneness being our humanity. So call us. You are welcome to do so at 501-433-0088. As one of the principal organizers for the Black Love events that we have been hosting this year at the New Deal Gallery on 2003 South Louisiana Street, right here in the city of Little Rock, 72206, I am always looking for the next topic that can draw us together as community so that we can gather in a space and unleash our energy so that we can figure out what the next steps are in this struggle towards collective liberation. Collective liberation, meaning everybody needs to be liberated. Because if there's one among us who is not free, then none of us are free. And we know, well, maybe we don't know, but some of us know that not everybody in this world, not everybody in this country, not everybody in this state, not everybody in this city is free. So that means that we all need to come together to move towards collective liberation. Conversation helps make that happen. And so as the creator and founder of Just Talk Consulting, that's what we do. We just talk, but it's a play on the words. We are just talking, that's true, but we are talking about justice. And we are doing so in ways that are open and honest and vulnerable and transparent so that we can get to the heart of the matter, because you can't change something that you refuse to name. And that's one of the problems we are having in our country right now. We don't want to name the realities of the situations and experiences of people in our midst. And so when I think about Bureau Chief Pat Rogers Ward, I know that she's always concerned about politics, always trying to help us. Oh, good morning from Chicago. Let me put a y'all see her right there. You see the comment. Good morning from Chicago. Bureau Chief Pat Ward signing on to make sure you know that she is still present, even though she's not here in the studio. But one of the things that I know that I have come to learn about Bureau Chief Pat Ward is that she is concerned about politics. And she's concerned about making sure that we are thinking about politics all the time, that we are thinking about the impact of politics, the effects of politics, always making sure that we understand the power of our engagement in politics. She'll bring folks on the show to talk politics. She'll have a co-host on the show to talk politics. She'll just talk politics all by herself. And so I've been having this conversation about politics, particularly in the Black arena, Black being used and defined in the most expansive word definition of the word, meaning members of the African diaspora. And I'm also willing to include people who identify as Black for some other reason. So there are people who have a parent who may be the world identifies as Black. And so therefore you align yourself with that one parent that you have and you say, I am Black. I have no problem with that. So in these spaces with Black folks that are dominating the spaces, that are in power, that are in the majority in these spaces, we're having this conversation about voting. And so I'm really thinking about the next Black Love event being titled Voting. To vote or not to vote? That is the question. So in the context of Black love, what it means to fight against the systems of domination and power and exclusivity and war that plague us, particularly as Black folks. In this fight, in this struggle to dismantle the system of white inhumanity, then where is the vote? What power? Where is the vote in the conversation? So we've got some people saying we need to vote. You've got some people saying you don't need to vote. So I want us to come together and have the conversation. And I'm just deciding or trying to decide whether or not that's the best course of action for us to have that conversation to vote or not to vote. And so because I'm thinking about it, anytime I'm thinking about something, it's important for me to get other people's input. I want to know what you think about what I'm thinking. I want to know how you feel. I want to hear your affirmations. I want to hear your rejections. I want to hear your challenges, your pushbacks. I want to hear how you push me forward. Yeah, let's do this, add this. I want to know what you are thinking. So here's what I've been contemplating, and I want you to chime in and let me know where you stand, how you feel, and if you think it'll be a good idea to move forward with a Black Love event where the topic is to vote or not to vote. That is the question. I want to read to you to get us started in this conversation that's rooted in politics. I want to read the tidbit from the Equal Justice Institute. The Equal Justice Institute is an organization that is led by Brian Stevenson that is located in Alabama. They have an entire museum called the Legacy Museum where they talk about the history of race, specifically at the intersection of the system of criminal injustice, mass incarceration. And so Brian Stevenson is an attorney who has dedicated his life to righting the wrongs of this world as it relates to Black folks caught up in the system of criminal injustice. He doesn't just focus on Black folks. I focus on Black folks, but anyone, particularly youth, who are caught up in this system that disproportionately sentences them to way more time than they deserve for actions that they may have committed, many times may not have committed. He wants to be a part of that conversation, and he has written books. He's been in documentaries. He's all over. If you want to look him up, Brian Stevenson, if you want Bryan, you want to look him up, you will see all of the work that he has done. It is a continual movement that he has. And of course, he's not a one-man show, but as one person, he recognized and found his lane, and he is not wavering from it. So you have the Legacy Museum where you can go in and you can see the artifacts, you can see the art, you can receive so much information that we need to have and we need to be distributing widely. And then there's another museum that's associated. It's not on the same grounds, but there's a trolley, there's transportation that will take you to the racial healing it's not a museum, but it is slavery. It is a monument to slavery. It's a memorial to lynching. It's a lynching memorial. And so you can see the names of the people across the United States in particular that have been lynched on our soil. And it is a very sobering experience because the way that it is designed is that the names are hanging. They are suspended in the air the same way a body would be suspended from a tree or from whatever they use to lynch a person, but usually it was a tree. Then you can see these names. And so you can even find your state. It's by state, it's state to state. So you can go and see Arkansas. You can see the number of rows of people who were lynched on the soil in this state. And so Brian Stevenson, as part of this movement with the museum and with the legacy and also with the lynching memorial, he creates this calendar. Every single year there's a calendar that gives us tidbits every single day to remind us, to keep in front of us, to motivate us to continue to think about the fact that we have not yet rectified anything that has happened to us as members of the African diaspora. So hear what he says. Hear what the calendar says. On this day, August 2nd in 1900. On this day, August 2nd, 1900, North Carolina votes to disenfranchise Black residents. Disenfranchise, that's an important word that we have to remember. Again, this is just the title. North Carolina votes to disenfranchise Black residents. On August 2nd, 1900, North Carolina approved a constitutional amendment that required residents to pass a literacy test in order to register to vote. Under the provision, illiterate registrants with a relative who had voted in an election prior to the year 1863 were exempt from the requirement. On August 2nd, 1900, North Carolina approved a constitutional amendment that required residents to pass a literacy test in order to register to vote. This is interesting for us because one of the questions that I'm asked all the time when I bring up these issues from 1900 or 1863 or 1944 or 2013 is why are you stuck in the past? Why you keep bringing up stuff? Why won't you let it go? Why can't you move on? And one of the obvious answers to that question is you cannot heal from wounds that are still open. Whenever you get a cut or a scratch, the first thing that you have to do is treat it with some kind of ointment that works to seal it. And then you have to cover it so that no more air can get through and seep in to infect it and reopen that wound. And then you have to give it time. You have to leave it alone and give it time so that it then begins to stitch itself back together and heal. There may be a scar to remind you that it's there, but there's enough healing to happen for you to forget about it until somebody says, "What's that on your arm?" You say, "Oh yeah, I remember that happened, blah, blah, blah." But in the world in which we live, as it relates to race relations, we have not yet applied any ointment to the scars that we bear in our bodies as members of the African diaspora from the system of enslavement that gave rise to racism, classism, capitalism, genderism, sexism, all of this stuff that we still continue to face today. So we cannot stop talking about something that is still, in fact, in motion, still, in fact, harming and scarring and murdering and killing and affecting our bodies on so many levels. So that's the obvious answer. But another answer to why we cannot stop having these conversations from 1900 is because some people are not seeing the iterations. Iterations mean the slight changes that are happening to keep the same thing in motion. So we're talking about a system of enslavement, and most people think about it only as chattel slavery, the time when people were held as property. And because you don't see people being held as property, because you don't see it, and because you don't recognize, because it's not the way of the world the way that it was before, you assume that it's not happening because people are no longer in that same condition. But the iteration of it says, well, we're going to make a slight slight change. We still gonna enslave you. That's gonna stay the same. But the iteration is a slight change that makes it look different. So if it looks different, I can convince you that it feels different. And if I can convince you that it feels different, then I can persuade you that it is different. And then you can begin to perpetuate the lie that it's no longer there. That, oh no, that's not what that is. It doesn't feel like it. It doesn't look like it. So it must not be. And that is the tool, the weapon that the world is using against us by not talking about it, by not naming it, by not keeping it in front of our faces and showing us the nuances of it. And that's why people think that we are no longer being enslaved. And that is an absolute untruth. Here is Phyllis Brown. Letting it go, quote, is trick language similar to the ideology of forgiveness. Let me read that again. Letting it go is trick language similar to the ideology of forgiveness. Black people have been conditioned to forgive. No matter what happens to our bodies, we have been conditioned to forgive. I was talking to a friend yesterday who was recounting the stories of his childhood in which violence plagued his home. As a child, he would be beaten. I'm not talking about a little pop on the hand. I'm not talking about a little scolding with the finger in the face. I'm talking about beaten, and beaten because of something like failing to tie his shoes. And when he was old enough to have a conversation with the one who abused him in his home, he said, "Why? I just have a question because the people, and this happened to me when my brother came to visit not too long ago. The people in the room were recounting the stories of violence in their home and were making jokes about it. So it became a laughing matter. So now it's entertainment for us at the table, those of us being abused in the home. The violence now becomes a form of entertainment." And so he stopped it. He disrupted that conversation and said, "Wait a minute, I have a question. Why? I just want to know, why did I get beat for simple things like not tying my shoes?" Because of course you remember that kind of trauma. I don't care how old you are, you remember that kind of trauma. And as the conversation progressed over days and years, one of the members of the family rose up to support the abuser. Well, you got to remember, that's still your family. And you got to remember, they were trying to do the best they can. They need you. You need to talk to them. You need to forgive them. I'm like, but why? Why do I have to forgive somebody who abuses me intentionally? And so I've been thinking about that as it relates to politics. Because remember, this conversation is rooted in politics. So when you have Ron DeSantis in California blocking the curriculum, the African-American curriculum that would give rise to conversations that talk about the realities of the system of enslavement, he blocks that. But then the Board of Educators usher in a new curriculum that says that there was a benefit to slavery because the people who were enslaved now have skills that they can apply to their personal lives and somehow become better citizens or whatever they think is going to happen. That's in Florida. What did I say it was? Ron DeSantis in Florida. I don't know where I said it was, but he's in Florida. When you have this happening, then he ushers in this new curriculum that says that that people who were enslaved, they received benefits from being enslaved. So now the implication is that the people who were enslaved were unskilled, that they needed slavery, like Tom Cotton would say. It was a necessary evil, because from this necessary evil, you are now in a better position to be part of this society. You are in a better position to be productive in this society. And so we want to make sure that we now tell the story of the system of enslavement so that we let people know that if it had not been for the white folks who were enslaving us, we would not have the skills that we have. So that's because of politics. Politics put him in the position to make these decisions that are affecting us on this level. So the idea that white people taught us something, that we ought to be grateful for the system of enslavement because our masters helped put us in a better position to be productive in this country for our own selves. It was for our own soul's sake, I'm sure they would argue. Then that is politics, is the fault of that, of allowing him to be in a position to do that. So I began to think, well, I definitely don't agree that I know it's a lie from the pit of hell that in slavery was a necessary evil and that people who were enslaved benefited from it and that we learned from the feet of the mouth. I know that's, but what did we learn from white? That's the question that I've been pondering as it relates to politics that empowers white people to make decisions about our lives through curriculum, through healthcare, through education, through housing, through transportation, through the environment, through our food. All of this happens because of politics, because these people are voted into office. These people are given this power from the voice of the people that elect them. And then this is the result. So when we talk about loving Blackness, the question of voting has to be put on the table so that we can really flesh out to vote or not to vote, because that is the critical question. Let me get this caller. Caller, you are live on the air. Thanks for calling at KBF 88.3 FM.
Yeah, people love this is so cool here. Good to hear you again today.
Surprise, surprise.
Yes. Surprise. A good surprise, though. But you do good. Talking. Yes. Now, what do you think about aggregating people of color aggregating? You know what the word aggregate means, don't you?
Yes.
And what does it mean to you?
Separating parts from a whole.
Yes. Now, if, like you say, if the whole comes together, and, well, first I would say, voting, yes, we should vote, but we should aggregate our vote, come together as a whole, because the way it is now, I look at it, they got tricked for us, and you know, commercials, tricks for kids, and that's what they trick us like. We talk about our history, and I always say, not to know what happened before we were born is to remain perpetually a child. And like, these people that come and we vote for, they tell us what they have done. Now we're talking Saturday about and the brother disagreed, and this is neglect issues, they maliciously neglect them. And I think need to aggregate. I get along with you too. You know what I'm saying? All right, listen on, and if you answer when I call back, if you want to talk, we'll do that. Okay, listen on, but let's aggregate.
So I want to get these comments here. Thank you, Solar Beam. So this is a reminder that whatever I said about Ron DeSantis, Phyllis Brown is reminding me that he's in Florida because I said California. So forgive me for saying that. And then here's another comment. Ghana, Mali, and Songhai are among the greatest empires, not the United States. Gali, Mali, and Songhai are among the greatest empires, not the United States. I'm sure this goes back to education, this goes back to who we allow to determine how our children and how our world will be educated through, and we do that through the power of the vote because we put these people in office. I'm sure that they would disagree with you. I'm sure many people, I drive around sometimes to see how many people are waving the flag of the United States in from their homes, outside of their homes. And I'm sure that there are several people who would argue that the United States is the greatest country on earth. And I don't have a problem with them claiming that. I really don't have a problem with the claims that people make. My problem comes when you begin to engage in conversation and people cannot support their claims with substantial information that can be rooted in the facts and the realities of who we are. So make your claim, but make sure that your claim is informed. Make sure that you can stand by your claim. Make sure that you can support your claim. Make sure that you can withstand the questions. Because to think that you can just say something and everybody just says, okay, just because you said it, is rooted in the privilege that the system of whiteness continues to perpetuate, that you think just because you said it, because you are you, because you hold these identities and you show up in this space as what we call white and male and heterosexual and Christian and veteran, and you think just because of that, you can do whatever you want and everyone should follow because you are who you are. And because, as Solar Beam will say, you said what you said. Well, that doesn't fly with me. And I'm sure it doesn't fly with a lot of other people. So to think that we are the greatest country would probably suggest that you haven't done the work to find out to do the work, to educate yourself about the other countries and the other places amongst us in this world. But I want to go back to something that Solar Beam said. I want to make sure that I'm hearing him clearly. You all let me know if you all heard the same. Well, no, I'm not trying to see if I heard him clearly. I'm trying to tell you what I experienced from listening to him. So talking about aggregate, he's calling us for, we should aggregate, which means that we should take all of the particulars of different groups and we should come together as a whole. So what I experienced in listening to him talk is to put forth the understanding, the reality that all of us are facing a common enemy. The system of white inhumanity harms us all. Even if you identify, even if the world identifies you, even if you can check a box that says you are white, you are still being harmed and traumatized and dehumanized by the system of white inhumanity. So if we can agree that all of us are facing the same enemy, and then regardless of the particulars of our community, so whether we are white, whether we are Black, whether we are people of color, whether we are heterosexual, whether we are same gender loving, whether we are transgender, whether we are disabled, whether we are thicker than Snickers, regardless, whether we live downtown or whether we live in a different neighborhood, regardless of what makes up our communities, all of these communities are plagued by this same system. So if all of those communities would come together and form a whole and weaponize our voices and our bodies, then we could move forward to create and realize and reimagine what it means to live together, human to human. Then we can say heaven has arrived on earth. Then we could say that. That's what I experienced in what Solar Beam was saying. Here's my concern with that. When we look at the history of racism in the world, the more melanin you have in your body, the more abusive the treatment that you receive from this world, from this country, from this state, from this city, from this municipality. We can drill it all the way down. And so if that is the case, no, not if that's the case, since that's the case, what history has proven to us is that as Black folks, we can aggregate. We can align ourselves with any other group who raises their voices against this same system that we are fighting. We can align ourselves with any other group. We can come together and form a whole with any other group and stand side by side. We can say it loud. We can march. We can protest. We can do all of those things. And the very group that is beside us in the conversation will be elevated as a result of those actions, while our condition never changes. And so it's important for us to understand that we are all fighting the same enemy. It is important for us to understand that there is power in numbers. It is important to understand that we need to unify, but it's also the reality that when we as Black folks unify with other folks, they get their stuff and leave while we still fight. Case in point. Remember the Suffrage Act? When women were demanding, when women were raising their voices, when women were in a movement, all women in a movement to make sure that they had the right to vote. Here's a situation where there was aggregation. Here's a situation where people from all people that identified as women and understood the struggle of not being able to vote came together and said, we need the right to vote. These were white women. These were Black women coming together, aggregating, saying, yes, we need the right to vote. And we're going to campaign together. We're going to make speeches together. We're going to march together. We're going to have discussions together. We're going to stay up paths together. We're going to do it all together because all women, all women, period, deserve the right to vote. And what happened? White women got the right to vote. Black women were still left behind. Black women didn't get the right to vote the same time that white women did. And why? The only distinguishing factor was race. And the white women had the audacity to tell Ida B. Wells, look, come on now. We need you to get in the back. We don't need you to be front and center. We don't need you to be loud and proud. We need you to get in because you may hinder us, woman. Black woman. And so we have to remind ourselves that when we talk about aggregation, yes, it's a lofty idea. And that's what I told my friend the other day. We were having this conversation. What Black people have done, and in some cases to our detriment, we have dedicated ourselves to an idea, the idea of kumbaya, the idea of sanctification, the idea of salvation. We have aligned ourselves with the hope of oneness, with the hope of white people recognizing us as human. We've aligned ourselves with the ideal of it. And we want it so badly because it makes sense to be one. It makes perfect sense. But that's not generally the reality. So if we're going to aggregate, that's fine. I just want to make sure that I get mine in the process. Caller, you're live on the air, KBF 88.3. Thanks for calling. Caller, you're live on the air, KBF 88.3. Thanks for calling. Okay, why y'all not saying that? Can y'all hear me? Here we go. Caller, you're live on the air. Hey, Brother Willie. I can't call you brother.
You know, you can. You can call me uncle, whatever. You know, I just said the word chief. You know, you thought that. See, I ain't gonna let you yet. We fighting. You ain't gonna take me to that space.
Okay.
Go out for that. There's 107 degrees a day. They say, "Oh, get out to 105." And my son, he came over. He bought him. He got a dumpster. You know, I can get a dumpster through the
Yes.
keep for 2 or 3 days and do your thing.
Yes.
And that's how he got there for me yesterday, and he came home worked 5-10 hours. He took off from work and did it, and he got too hot. I knew he was going to do it. I tried to get him to slow down, but he wouldn't. And he came back today, and he left a while ago, and he said, well, Dad, I'll come back tomorrow. I said, yeah, okay, because it's good. I was watching you yesterday where you was watching it, and I said, you know, I don't want you, I won't get too hot and let you for you to get too hot. So I always been where you've been. But I said, anyway, he's going, he'll be back in the morning, God willing, at 7 o'clock when it's cool. But I think I thought it was Sister Patricia. I said, let's see what Patricia's talking about. But we just went to, and I said to one, I said, it's got to be a pretty good one. I said, now, come on today. Talk over everything.
Right now we're talking about Stola being called in and said we need to aggregate. Everybody needs to come together and form a whole.
In the sense that you are saying it means what?
It means to take parts and make a whole. So everybody needs to come together, whoever you are, all the parts, all the different people in the world come together so that we can fight as one.
Diversity and unity?
Diversity and unity, yes, yes.
Okay, now. It's good to hear you walk forward. Now, tell me something. What was going to keep them, everything working, mechanically right up there? Well, you know, the boards and everything. Well, what is the doctor saying for that?
Please ask Tony that question when he comes back, because I can see them working on it in here. But you please ask him, because I want the dates.
But they been saying, it's on the phone, they say blah, blah, blah. And I'm passing on the word, I'm propagating, telling people, just hold on, y'all. Your girl, she was on yesterday, that's so hard. She kept kicking the shit. Was it yesterday she did jazz?
Yes, yes.
And she was saying about everything is supposed to be your profession is on its way, and Russell's been saying it's on its way, and Big Grip's been saying, I think everybody says it'll be here tomorrow, blah, blah, blah. Now, so you haven't got nothing concrete.
I do not. Yes, he's in Houston. He'll be back tomorrow.
A union man, people don't realize, a union man is definitely inception years ago. I mean, a real good one, like Tony is a real old school union man. He's a young man, but he is his way of thinking, understands it. He come on real strong and get the people to thinking. So we as a whole, we just got so relaxed on pagan stuff. Take off coming down and ring your fly. Reparation checks and blah, blah, blah. And, you know, we're not talking about the middle passage where it needs to be talked about. It shouldn't even be here going to it. It's perfect. 8 years on the books. 8 years on the calendar.
Hmm.
Okay, I want to do something for my great grandchildren. It's called legacy. Like the Rockefellers. Right now, black is, you see now, black is midnight. I'd have to grin when you see my teeth to see midnight. Let's do that. What is wrong with you? You joking, you. But anyway. True. Look at I'm in the context they use it now. He said, get up and work and do something because you the power to do it. I want you back. I'm making this narrative. People need to really think this like a man did. I just get back, man. So big comments.
Yes, he has.
Oh, I miss it. I talked to a brother, a Caucasian brother, white brother, a vanilla white, whatever, vanilla tea or whatever. He was African. He was in the airport. Me and him stopped by my house. He walks his dog. They got an African or whatever. And me and him sat there and got they changed names. I'm about 8 years old here, I'm his big brother. And I gave him some information about the veteran, what you do for them, get the veteran. I've gotten together. They've been on this show. And this school over by where I stay at, it's an old school. They're on. And they're trying to buy this land. He didn't know what it was, and I told him it's about 4 o'clock. I gave him direction to see if he wanted to follow. And anyway, I told him he is seeking volunteers. I'm gonna go by there. I'm gonna do some volunteer work.
Okay.
Because the veteran needs him.
Okay.
He involved the war and training. But look there, you bought them. I thought, okay, Patricia.
Yeah.
Is she okay?
She's just fine. She's in Chicago. She'll be back next week.
Oh, she is. I thought what you said.
Okay. Okay, Mr. Willie. Thank you for calling us. Okay. Thank you so much. Hey, Mr. Russell. All right. Thank you. So it was a lot that I'm not going to be able to remember every single thing that Mr. Willie talked about, but one of the things that touched me, that pierced me, that he said was, I'm tired of waiting. I'm tired of all these promises. Even the promise of the board that we say we're going to get in the studio. I'm tired of that. Where is that? And that's the same feeling, the same energy that we carry, particularly as Black folks in America. Y'all want to talk about it's over, slavery is over, let it go. Okay, well, if we let it go, then what do we have to show for it that you've let it go? When we say that we've healed from something, that we can let go of something, it's because a new day has been ushered forth. It's because we're living in a new dawn. It's because things are different now. There is no difference. And where is my difference? I'm tired of waiting on my difference. Give me my difference now. That's what I hear Mr. Willie saying. Let me get this comment in from Phyllis Brown on Facebook. Oh, going back to what I said about aggregating and how that did not work out for Black women who aggregated with white women in order to achieve the right to vote. And I mentioned Ida B. Wells, and so here's a response to that. Ida B. Wells openly confronted white women in the suffrage movement who ignored lynching. Because of her stance, she was often ridiculed and ostracized by women's suffrage organizations in the United States. Let me read that again. Ida B. Wells openly confronted white women in the suffrage movement who ignored lynching. Because of her stance, she was often ridiculed and ostracized by women's suffrage organizations in the United States. So when we talk about aggregation, when we talk about all of the parts coming together to form a whole so we can understand, what did Brother Willie say, Mr. Willie say, the diversity and unity, how that is important for us to move us forward. We can talk about that, but we got to make sure that we are clear on the pitfalls and the trappings of that, because we as Black folks have fallen prey to that aggregation over and over and over again. Caller, you're live on the air, KBF 88.3 FM. Thanks for calling.
Yes, this is Sawubona again. And you can it's so color. It's a whole it's so few control so many. So these people, the white supremacists, now we So I'm saying that we have been sick by them so many times. Like you say, they march with us, the FBI, the CIA, they send in their people to join us, and we can, whatever we try to do. But I'm saying if people of color just in this territory, was I say all the other different countries and stuff, they still controlled and dominated by race, by racism. And until this racism is eliminated and replaced with a system of justice, we will be, like I say, like their kids being tricked. The tricks are for kids. I think when they came up with that, they knew that addict would be going on for years and years, just like that Willie Lynch syndrome. They have a scientific formula to confuse us, to keep us on this not being serious about being universal man and universal woman. But politics is just a relationship between people. And what we need to do, like I say, if we aggregate, and I would love to hear people of color or more, me being a more, because now there's two words, more and more. But we deserve more than what we've been given, especially we stand in the wrong line and still get left back. So these tricks that they've been affecting us with. Now, like you said, so many of us are complicit. Ooh, man, see that, especially when they use our women as political pawns. Does the sister know what the real deal is? But anyway, I'm so proud of Kamala Harris and all these other women that they use as political pawns, but we still get nothing. So for us to get something out of this, we're going to have to advocate, like I say, come together, and that's a hard word to say, come together for what? Constructive results. If it's not constructive and we're not producing justice and incorrectness and replacing it with correct government, we're going to get the same thing. Tricks. Like I say, tricks up for kids. Let's talk to real adults. I'm talking to the grown people now. And
the call just ended on its own, so that must have been on your end, because all of a sudden I heard a beep and the call ended. But I think that you were winding down anyway, Solar Beam. So this brings me back to the part of the conversation at the beginning when we were talking about DeSantis in Florida, who wants to, yes, Phyllis Brown is asking the question, women as political pawns. That's a question for you, Solar Beam, that we'll talk about another time. I don't have time for you to talk about that today, but we do need to talk about that. I was struck by your phrase when you said women being used as political pawns as well. But again, we do not have time to flesh out that conversation on today, but I do want to come back around to that to talk about what you mean, to get your insight, because I'm glad that you called back to help me understand what you meant by aggregate, because I was concerned about aggregating with all of the communities that continue to leave us behind when they get theirs because of their privilege of being labeled as white. No problem, BureauChief Pat Ward. Hey, y'all see Mr. Russell? That's the one. That's our sound engineer. Look at you, the one who makes it happen for us to talk, to have shows that's pre-recorded, like the one tomorrow. I gotta send you something now. So yes, we are glad to be here. You are so welcome, BureauChief Pat Ward. So glad that you offered me the opportunity to sit in for you. I appreciate it. I take it as a compliment. And so when we come back and we talk about DeSantis saying that DeSantis now wanting to have new standards for the Black curriculum. People want to be called African American. I call myself Black, so I'm going to use Black. The Black curriculum. Then they want to say that people who were enslaved learned something. That we were unskilled labor and we learned something through the system of enslavement. And so I push back on that, absolutely push back on that. But then I also want to add that there are some things that we learned from our masters, the people that call themselves our masters, the masters. There are some things that we learned. The number one thing that we learned is violence. That's the number one thing that we learned that I don't, you call it a skill if you want to. I don't know how I feel about calling it a skill, but that's one thing that we learn. And one of the ways that violence, we talked about iterations. One of the ways that violence shows up for us as Black people is violence in our home. Yes, the way that we whip our children, the way that we beat our children, the way that we talk to our children, and we do it in the name of the master. Because I'm doing this so that you won't go out there and get in trouble. I'm trying to get you ready so that you can stay alive, because we are complicit in this idea that just being is a crime. And so I'm going to make sure that I whip you into shape so that you lose the essence of who you are, so that you can acclimate into who they want you to be, and then keep the conversation moving towards white inhumanity. That's one of the ways. But another one of the ways that the violence has shown itself strong in the Black community is the separation of the family. During the system of enslavement, we were not allowed to experience the joy of our bodies by being romantically aligned with each other and getting married and enjoying and creating a home. We weren't allowed to do that. Our children, many of us were bred, and then the babies that we had were stripped from our arms as they were suckling at our breasts. That separation, that happened during the system of enslavement. We see the continuation of that with the system of mass incarceration. But we also see the continuation of that with Black folks who have now decided that if you are Black and same gender loving, if you are Black and trans, then you no longer deserve to be called members of our family. And so when we talk about when Solar Beam says, no, let me make it clear. I'm talking about Black folks coming together to form unity, to form a unity. Black folks coming together to stand as one. Black folks unifying so we can fight. But that means that means to aggregate, you got to accept every Black body. But when you decide that somebody who's gay or somebody who's trans cannot be a part of your family, how you gonna aggregate? And so that idea that you can look at your child and declare your child unfit to be a member of your family, you got that from white people. That ain't your history. That ain't your ancestry. That's not what we carry in our bodies about understanding the definition of what it means to be family. You learned that. And Buzak has continued to say to us, one of the ways that we move forward is by unlearning and unremembering. And I know I'm right about it because I just had a conversation with my mama yesterday where there are members at the Hayes Center where she goes on Tuesdays and Thursdays to enjoy people watching most of all, where they're having conversations about changing their wheels so that they will not include people who are gay in them. So if we want to aggregate as Black folks, we got our own work to do. And that number one work is to unlearn the violence of family separation that we got from our masters, from the people who claim to be superior. I guess Brother Russell in here because he's telling me it's time to go. Are you up next?
2 more minutes.
Are you? I got 2 more. You see what I'm what are you trying to tell? You sending me a message, Mr. Russell? I believe you sending me a message. Oh, get you on the I don't think we have time. I was trying to get you, caller, but when I clicked the button, all I heard was the dial tone. But we got to get out of here. We've got 1 minute left. Thank you so much for sitting with me throughout Arkansas Talks. You realized that Bureau Chief Pat Ward wasn't here and you stayed anyhow. Thank you so much for that. I consider it a privilege and an honor to be here serving as guest host for today. But don't forget that she'll be right back next Wednesday from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. for Arkansas Talks right here at KABF 88.3 FM. Also want to remind you that Domino's in the Park. Domino's in the Park is happening tomorrow at 5. No, not tomorrow. Tomorrow's Thursday. Friday at 5 p.m. right here in Petaway Park. We will be there from 5 to 7. If we want to stay a little longer, we can. Hey, we are grown. And I do hope that you all know that taking time to enjoy ourselves, taking time to be at leisure, that is an important part of our resistance as Black folks. And we do a lot of talking about strategy and tactics and moving forward at the domino table while we talking noise when we holler fitting. So we want to invite all of you to come on Friday. Thank you so much. You have been listening to KABF 88.3 FM, where we are the voice of the people.
No, I didn't mean to say about that. I'm just, I turned the radio on and now I was wondering whether Pat was back from Chicago. So I guess she's not.
She wasn't back. She's not back.
Oh,
But she angry with us sitting in the television.
okay.
But me and Tony will be here, so I can see you the recording.
Okay. All right. I'll be here a while. So.